This conference will now be recorded.
You all set?
Yes, sir.
Well, welcome everybody. I have a brief statement before we start. In response to social distancing protocols established by the governor, today's meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District will be held entirely online. Our hearts go out to those impacted by coronavirus and those caring for the sick. Today's meeting order will include Governance Committee, Finance Committee, and then the regular board meeting. Meeting agency agendas are available at HRBRRD.com and under board meetings. We ask that you close other programs on your computer or phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for public comment. Comments may also be emailed to HRAO@HRBRRD.com. Mr. Rosenthal, Finance Committee.
Good morning. I think we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Leslie, if you'd be kind enough to call the roll.
Yes, all on video feed. Chairman, Committee Chair Jeffrey Rosenthal.
Present.
Committee members Albert Hayes, Richard Byrd.
Here.
Ken DeWitt.
Here.
Board Chairman as ex officio committee member Mark Finkel.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie, that's me. Chief Engineer Robert Fultan.
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Manicha.
Here.
Area Administrator John Hodgman.
Here.
And Compliance Officer Stephanie Rozecki.
Here.
All counted and present.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. First order of business would be a motion. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the schedule, the agenda for today's Governance Committee meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion, the committee agenda is adopted. I'll entertain a motion to approve the September 13, 2019 minutes of the Governance Committee.
I'll make that motion.
Second? Can I second it?
You can.
Second?
Mr. DeWitt,
All
Mr.
in
Rosenthal.
favor? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. First order of business, excuse me, is resolution to satisfy the review of the district investment policy. And that, I believe, is Mr. Minutia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before going into any of the substance here, I just want to thank Rob Leslie for his help in drafting all of the resolutions and memos for this meeting, for the Finance Committee meeting, and for the board. It's very helpful in this particular cycle. As the resolution states, Public Authority Law Section 2925 requires authority in every public benefit corporation shall by resolution adopt comprehensive investment guidelines. Now, the district has not had investments in many years. It did last during the 2008 to 2011 cycle, And you can see that information on balance sheets for each of those years. Even if we did have money to invest, the list of permitted investments that are authorized by statute and the current yield curve that we see in the marketplace, would not beat the short-term investment pool that is managed by the state controller, and that's where the vast majority of the district's funds reside on any given day. Just to give you a sense of the yield differential, STIP, the short-term investment pool, has yielded about 2% throughout the current state year, and 91-day treasury bills are about 0.25%. So you see we do much better in STIP than we would, on a short-term treasury security. Not recommending any changes to the investment policy for this year. I did just want to point out that on packet page 7, you will see the section that references collateral. And we did do some investigating of the collateral provisions because the Hudson River Area General Fund checking account balance is often greater than the coverage that's offered by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That FDIC coverage goes up to $250,000. When we did talk to Bank of America, which is the HRA General Fund checking account resides, they were able to provide to us in writing very specific assurances that the district deposits are collateralized, that collateral is marked to market on a daily basis and is reported to the state controller because OSC is a signatory to our checking account. So with that said, I'd be happy to answer questions about the district's investment policy.
Thank you, Mr. Minutia. With regard to that, then I'll entertain a motion to advance the resolution concerning our investment policy to the full board.
I'll make that motion.
Second that motion.
Mr.
All in
DeWitt,
favor?
roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Minutia, we call upon you again with regard to discussing our review and approval of our procurement policy. The floor is yours, Mr. Minutia, or the screen is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Public Authority Law, Section 2879 requires that every public authority and every public benefit corporation shall by resolution adopt comprehensive guidelines regarding the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts, including an annual review and approval of those guidelines. I'd like to thank the chair, Mr. Rosenthal, for pointing out a couple of typographical errors in the procurement policy, which we will fix right after this meeting. There are two substantive changes that we are recommending to the policy. If you move to packet page 17, you will see there that New York State has raised the limit on the small business concerns, minority women-owned business enterprises, service, disabled, and veteran-owned businesses. That discretionary threshold was $200,000. It's been raised as of January 1st of this year to $500,000. So we thought it was prudent to continue to track New York State law and New York State procurement guidelines, and we recommend making this change. If you scroll a little bit further to packet page 28 in section 27, the district has, for as long as anyone can recall, been submitting contracts in excess of $50,000 to the state controller for review and approval. So the first sentence in paragraph 1 now states that the district will do this voluntarily. All we're trying to do here is make sure that our policy is consistent with what our practice has been for quite some time. With that, no other changes are recommended to the procurement policy, and I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Just a general question. Can I assume because of the increase in thresholds, we really have greater flexibility now in the awarding of contracts?
Yes, we do.
Our counsel is also nodding his head. With that, I'll entertain a motion to advance the procurement policy to the board and thank Mr. Minutia for his detailed recitation of the change.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Mr. Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, the resolution passes for motion to the full board. Let me get back to my schedule. Tim, I think it's your floor. Let me just get back to my calendar, please. Easier said than done.
We're all making history today here, Mr. Chair.
Not sure it's the history we'd like to be making, but. Oh, God. Yes, the third item is, excuse me, discussion of our review, approval of our property guidelines policy. Again, Mr. Minutia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Public Authority Law, Section 2896 states that every public authority and every public benefit corporation shall, by resolution, adopt comprehensive guidelines regarding the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of contracts for disposal of property, including an annual review and approval by the board. We're recommending no changes to this particular policy. The district is in the process of disposing of some property in partnership with the Office of Services. Unfortunately, this OGS process has been slowed because of New York pause, but we believe that our partnership with OGS is consistent with our current policy, and therefore we're not making any recommendation for changes this year.
Thank you, Mr. Minutia. Again, I'll entertain a motion to advance to the board for approval the property disposition guidelines or policy. I'll take that motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion advances. The last order of business is a second reading of the bylaws. Mr. Leslie has been working on those bylaws. They were presented, I believe, at the last board meeting.
They were. Basically, this being the second of three readings under the policy on policy making. The changes, as we discussed last time, have to do with the principal offices, eliminating the Watertown office as a principal office so that everything gets delivered here where council and the executive director has their offices. Changing the notice provision for a special meeting such that we provide reasonable notice rather than 7 days notice in the event that we have to have a special meeting, so that if we have to have a special meeting on less than 7 days notice, we can give reasonable notice. We've corrected a couple of spelling and grammatical errors and corrected a site towards the end of the document, referencing the public authorities law rather than the state finance law. And also noted that all of our notices, which heretofore were made in our official newspapers, will now be made in the official newspapers, but also on the website and through the regulating district social media channels. Those are basically the the changes to date. I would recommend any questions either be brought up today or at the May meeting, where the policy on policies would dictate that the board could then act on approval of the amendments to the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Any further discussion this morning? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the governance committee for April 14, 2020.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Governance committee is adjourned.
At 10:24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your effort. And thanks to the everybody for their work on this stuff. That was great. Now we move to the Finance Committee meeting and Mr. DeWitt.
I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Meeting's called to order at 10:24. On video feed, we have Committee Chairman Kenneth DeWitt,
Here.
Committee members Albert Hayes, Mr. Hayes. Albert, can you hear me?
Evidently, he's not hearing.
Richard Byrd,
Here.
Jeffrey Rosenthal,
Here.
Board Chair as ex officio member Mark Finkel,
Here.
John Callahan, Executive Director,
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie, that's me, I'm here. Chief Engineer Robert Fulton, Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Manicha,
Here.
Area Administrator John Hudson,
Here.
and Compliance Officer Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
One more chance for Mr. Hayes. Albert, can you hear us?
Albert.
In any case, we have a quorum with the 3 members noting their presence. You're good to go, Mr. DeWitt.
Can I have a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda?
Mr. Byrd or Mr. Rosenthal, you guys are both members of this committee.
I'll move.
Yes, I'll make,
Mr. Rosenthal and Mr. Byrd seconded.
And can I have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? The motion is approved. Can I have a motion to approve the June 11th, 2019 Finance Committee meeting minutes?
So moved. So moved.
Okay,
Mr. Rosenthal moved.
I'll second it.
Mr. DeWitt second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Under new business, can I have the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Minucha, lay out the authority and budget plan for 2020 and 2021?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Section 2801 of the Public Authorities Law requires the district, as well as other state and local authorities, to complete and submit a budget report 90 days before the start of its fiscal year, which for us, this fiscal year starts July 1. You'll see that report on back at page 58. The revenue and expenditure categories for this report have been created by the Authority Budget Office, as have the years covered by the report. So let me just quickly walk you through what you have here. For fiscal year 2018-19, these are actually audited figures, which you're familiar with because we reviewed the audit back in December. And you can see that total revenues and financing sources of a little over 7.5 million, total expenditures close to 9 million, and a deficiency of revenue over expenditures of almost 1.5 million. Nothing really surprising there because we've seen all this in the past. Thank you. When you look one more column to the right, you will see the our estimates for the year that we're currently in. And you can see that we are now projecting, based on 9 months of actual activity, a deficit of almost $492,000. We mentioned that at the board meeting last month. It's also in my summary for this month. For the upcoming year, the year 2020-21, that starts on July 1st, this is in fact the actual that was adopted by the board as part of this triennial budget that the district is required to adopt. These figures were adopted back in June of 2018, and we haven't made any alterations to these numbers since those are the adopted figures by the board. For the 3 out years, we are doing our best to give what we think is a conservative estimate of revenue that the district is likely to realize, as well as the expenditures that it's likely to incur under the assumptions, by and large, that the existing array of services that the district provides will continue on, that we will make investments in our infrastructure along the lines of our capital planning process, that we will finance those capital improvements via the issuance of debt, and that will result in a modest surplus of $400,000 in year 2021-22, a surplus of almost $8,000 the year after that, and a shortfall of a little over $500,000 in the year 2023-24. So with that overview, I would be happy to answer any questions any members of the board have about this.
If none, I'd like to ask for a motion to advance to the full board and recommend adoption of the resolution approving the budget and financial plan required pursuant to Section 2801 of the Public Authorities Law.
So moved.
Second. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
Thank you, Ken. I'd like to call the regular board meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Leslie?
Thank you, Mr. Finkel. Meeting convened at 10:32. On video feed, we have Board Chairman Mark Finkel,
Here.
First Vice Chair Jeffrey Rosenthal,
Here.
Second Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt,
Here.
Board members Albert Hayes, Richard Byrd,
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan,
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie, that's me, Chief Engineer Robert Fulton,
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha,
Here.
Area Administrator John Hodgkin,
Here.
and Compliance Officer Stephanie Rozicki.
Here.
Yay. Okay, everybody's here, Chairman.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
That was Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Byrd.
Yes. We have no guest here. I need approval of the March 10th, 2020 regular board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second? Someone? Ken seconded it.
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah,
That's all right. Rosenthal, DeWitt.
yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the report of our executive director, Mr. Callahan.
Good morning and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask first if everyone can hear me all right.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Good morning, and it's difficult to my report incidentally can be found on page 67. I'll just go over a couple of noteworthy items, some of which since the date of the filing of that report, difficult to imagine just a month ago, just over a month ago, we were here together in the boardroom. We weren't shaking hands, we were touching elbows, but we were for most purposes in normal operations. These are extraordinary times, as evidenced by the meeting format today, and certainly my verbal report to the board today will reflect that. First, I just want to generally call to the board's attention the superb performance of the staff in light of what has been a rapidly changing and evolving situation in terms of reporting, not reporting, coming back in to handle essential tasks. Everybody has been, as you might imagine, terrific. There's been no diminution or degradation of our overall level of operational readiness to provide essential protections that we provide to downstream residents. We are on the job, ready to go. Particularly like to call to the board's attention and commend the leadership of Messrs. Fulton and Hudson, who have had to operationally deal with the absence of most staff on a regular basis, use discretion and judgment when calling people in for critical tasks, making sure that our core mission functions are supported. Great job by them as well. Also like to briefly commend to the board's attention the performance of the CFO, Tim Minicha, Anna Tracy, Kim Scott in particular, as they have very early on endeavored to make sure critical financial matters could be resolved quickly. We could conduct the important business from a fiscal standpoint of the regulating district. And certainly first and foremost among those tasks is the payment of our dedicated workforce remotely if possible. And we tested and successfully performed that operation early on. So we really thank them for stepping up to the plate as well. And really, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is something, as you know, that we saw coming early. Certainly heard from the governor that we were going to need to change the way we did certain things even before the directives came out about telecommuting and other functions. So we worked with our managed service provider to set up that remote access where necessary, have people begin telecommuting where possible, and adopt proper social distancing principles and keep our workforce safe. So we've been successful with that as well. With this pandemic and the state's response to it, we've all had to pitch in on matters that we do typically not within the purview of the regulating district. One of those was just recently, as we worked closely with the Executive Chamber and the Department of Labor to help address the considerable backlog in this state of applications for unemployment benefits. We got a call late last week for people to help make phone calls to advance some of those applications through the system. I can tell you that over 3 days, state employees from over 50 agencies made 280,000 calls, 400 of those made by our folks just over the last 3 days. So for volunteering for this effort, I specifically want to thank John Hodgson, Tim Minicha, Stephanie Rizicki, Gina Bowman, Dan Kiskis, and Danielle Thorne. As we say in the Coast Guard, John Hodgson and I would say, bravo Zulu, for pitching in on that. It's crazy times. I do want to note that tomorrow marks the day 1 year ago that I came aboard. I want to thank the board for its continued support. I think we've made great strides already, building upon the great work in the past and my immediate predecessor, interim executive director, Mr. Hodgson. And we look forward in the coming year to advance in a substantive way important capital projects, continue with increasing accessibility and efficiency improvements by adopting online permitting and other functions to help our forward-facing customer service capabilities, and also pursuing various other process improvements, savings, and efficiencies. I think we're on a good path here. It's been a great 1 year. I marked the 1 year here at the regulating district at a time of great uncertainty and unease, but we're going to look ahead. We're going to get through this and continue the important work of protecting the downstream residents and providing flow augmentation in our jurisdiction area. So with that, I yield and defer to any questions that the board members may have. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Callahan? Nice report, Jen.
Congratulations for staying with us a year, Mr. Callahan.
Yeah, and many more.
We appreciate it very much.
We have contract actions. We just have one resolution to extend contract C042013 with Bryant Rubino LLP to provide bond service work in connection with the issuance of serial bonds. Mr. Minicha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The district procured the services of bond counsel Bryant Rubino back in August 2013 as it contemplated debt issuance to finance investments in its infrastructure. That contract has been extended many times, the last of which extended it to August 4th, 2018. Since that period, the district has continued to need bond counsel services and expects to need them going forward as it seeks to revise its current financial arrangement with the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation. As a result, we're seeking an extension of the existing agreement with Bryant Rubino to December 31st, 2020. There is no monetary adjustment recommended in this resolution, just an extension of the term.
Okay, need a motion to extend the contract?
So moved.
I'll second.
Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. DeWitt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Next, staff and committee reports. The governance committee chair, Mr. Rosenthal, has 3 resolutions to bring to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minicha made a wonderful presentation on 3 matters at the governance committee. All members here were present for his recitation of them, so I'll make it brief. I'd offer a resolution, a motion with regard to approval of our investment policy.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
Mr. Rosenthal made the motion. Who seconded?
Second.
I'll
I
second.
will. Oh,
Any
All in
further-
favor? Oh,
I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Mr. Rosenthal?
Similarly, Mr. Chair, Mr. Manisha made a wonderful presentation with regard to advancing the discussion of our procurement policy. I'll make a motion to accept by the board.
You have a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. DeWitt.
Any further discussion? Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Lastly,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the approval of our property disposition guidelines as discussed by Mr. Manisha in the governance committee.
Second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finance Committee Chair Report, Mr. DeWitt.
I'd like to make a resolution to adopt the public authority budget and financial plan for 2021.
I'll make that motion or second that motion.
Mr. DeWitt, Mr. Rosenthal.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good, motions carry. Now we have the committee reports. General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over the last month, as a result of being able to bring this online, we have canceled the Granicus contract. And with Gina Bowman's help, we'll start downloading and converting the past board meeting videos, which had been archived pursuant to that agreement. We have continued to compile a comprehensive list of activities and tasks undertaken in the administration of the access permit system. Been working with the executive director and Mr. Manisha in negotiations with Tucker Strategies regarding the ground lease and usage agreement with Stillwater Associates. And generally getting ready for this meeting. Any questions regarding the conduct of the meeting or my report? I understand Mr. Hayes was able to hear us now and jumped in to second the last motion, so he's back.
Good. Excellent. I'm sorry, does that complete your report?
Yes, it does.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions for Mr. Leslie?
I have a question, Rob.
Somebody needs to mute.
Yeah, with regard to our financial disclosures, is there a blanket extension of those? I mean, some of us, including myself, are stuck in remote locations and we still have to apply.
This morning, as we were getting on about 9 o'clock, I saw an email which seemed to indicate that they've been extended from March 15th through May 15th through August 17th.
Perfect. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
literally just came in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. Any other questions? If not, we'll move to Compliance Officer, Mr. Zicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report can be found on page 72. Just a few quick things to highlight. Our MWGE third quarter report has been reviewed and approved by ESD. All required MWBE and SCVOB reports will be completed and submitted by the required deadlines. And as far as our student intern program is concerned, I continue to monitor the applications. The past 3 weeks, it's been at 76. No new applications are in there. And 15 of the applicants have applied directly to our intern program. The rest are just kind of thrown a wide net. Not sure how that's going to proceed. It's a day-by-day process, and come June or July, we'll see where we are as a nation or state with the COVID situation. As a reminder, please look at the contract status sheets on 73 and 74 as they satisfy the public authority requirement. If you have any questions, if not, that completes my report. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Minutia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CFO summary can be found on packet page 75. We have already covered quite a few financial topics today, so I'd just like to mention a couple of other items. First, we have taken some additional steps in these extraordinary circumstances in which we find ourselves operating to ensure that the district has enough cash on hand to pay its expenses on a daily basis. We are also seeking to reduce the number of general fund checks that we write. The underlying rationale there is just like we are operating under New York laws, so is the state controller's office, and so a longer time for them to review and give us approval. So we're generally trying to send less checks and things like that for them to have to review and approve, since they're down a number of staff. We have taken these steps in consultation with representatives of the state controller's office, and believe these steps are consistent with policies and procedures that make up the controller's guide to financial operations. Second thing I'd mention is that we hope to bring forward next month recommendations regarding the EFC agreement that I mentioned during the discussion about the contract extension with Bryant and Rubino. In general terms, we hope to extend that agreement by 2 years to November 2nd, 2022, and to increase the amount that we've borrowed by 4.1 million due to additional costs in the reconstruction of the spillway at Conklinville. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about anything financial.
Any questions for the CFO? Thank you very much for all your work on this. There was a lot there.
Thank you, sir.
Next, Chief Engineer, Mr. Fultan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 97. In the Hudson River area, we received approximately 95% of historic average precipitation. And with the onset and beginning of the spring freshet around March 10th, received about 145% of historic average inflow into Great Sacandaga Lake in the month of March. In the Black River area at Stillwater Reservoir, we received about 70% of historic average precipitation in March, and had about 130% of historic average in inflow. As I said, we began refilling on or about March 10th at all the reservoirs. We're progressing consistent with how we refilled historically, although maybe a week to 2 weeks a little bit earlier than the historic start of refilling, but progressing nicely. As far as the Fulton chain of lakes is concerned, on or around April 7th, we closed the gates and began refilling those reservoirs, consistent with our practice to minimize ice damage and to wait until the ice has melted sufficiently enough before completely refilling But we've passed that point and we're also refilling those reservoirs. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Fulton? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last is our Chief Administrator, Mr. Hodgins. Oh, Scott, unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 131. First of all, happy anniversary out there to Mr. Callahan. And pleasure having you on board, believe me. I've been manning the Sacandaga field office, and I've had Stephanie Porter come in once a week to process any permit renewals that have come in. And I've also had Dan Kiskis come in once a week to stay on top of new permits that are coming in. Stephanie and Dan do both come in on separate days, and we do practice the safe distancing while they are here. Just so the board knows, we have Eric Johnson is at the Conkinville Dam. Doug Chris is manning the Stillwater Dam. Darren Haar, Indian Lake Dam, and Kim Scott is coming in a few times a week at the Black River area office so we can stay on top of any mail, messaging, and checks that need to go out. I've been here at SFO processing work permits, answering the phone, doing the daily weather reports, and checking on encroachments. So it's been a very busy couple of weeks. Just trying to stay up with our daily work activities out at SFO. There's a lot of people around the lake. They want to do work. They don't have anything else to do. And 95% of the work permits that come in are being pushed right back out again. That concludes my report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions for the administrator? Thank you very much, Dan. Any board member questions or comments? If not, I need a resolution for the next board meeting, which is May 3rd in May 13th, excuse me, in Mayfield. I need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I think it's May 12th in Mayfield.
I'm sorry,
It's May 12th in Mayfield.
May 12th. Oh, okay. May 12th in Mayfield, excuse me. I stand corrected. Do we have a motion for that? A
I
second.
will.
I'll make that.
Albert, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you, everybody, for bearing with us in this time, and I need a motion to adjourn.
I will.
So moved, seconded.
Mark, who do you have for first and
I'm
second?
sorry?
Who do you have for first and second there?
I'll second.
Jeff seconded it, and Albert made the motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.